Oswald the Lucky Rabbit is one of Disney's oldest cartoon characters, preceding the mouse by close to a year, with the only other popular character that has seniority over both is Pete. Oswald first appearing in the Disney's Trolley Troubles cartoon all the way back in 1927, with other representation for him over the years being a bit all over the place or completely stagnant, mostly due to rights issues over the character involving Universal Studios and Disney. But his representation since the mid-2000s until now has been relatively solid, like becoming the secondary antagonist slash rival in the cult classic Epic Mickey, a game that played a major role in reintroducing Oswald to a more modern audience. Even as I write this video, a live-action hybrid series starring Oswald was confirmed to be in the works, with Jon Favreau leading the development. Oswald still isn't, Mickey Mouse levels of popular, because at this point, that guy is borderline impossible to overtake in terms of popularity by another Disney character, but enough to where people can actually recognize him as the iconic character he is. So I wanted to take this video to explore the origins of Oswald, how he's changed since the Roaring Twenties, and how future representation of the character could play out. This video has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I just finished playing Epic Mickey Rebrushed and I'm hyper-fixating on Oswald. Trust me, please.
Trust me! Just me!
No.
Back in January 1927, American film producer Charles Mintz wanted Disney to create a cartoon character they could sell to Universal, as Universal was looking to get back into the world of animation. Universal founder Carl Laemmle suggested Disney make the character a rabbit, while the name Oswald was one of many names written down on a slip of paper that would be drawn from a hat by the Universal publicity department. According to this newspaper titled the Calgary Daily Herald from 1936, it appears one of Universal's founders, P.D. Cochrane, was the one who quote-unquote christened him as Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. But at one point, an early press release paper from Universal Weekly referred to him as Oswald the Welsh Rabbit, and how he'd be starring in 26 cartoon comedies. Interestingly enough, Oswald's first cartoon, Poor Papa, wasn't released until much later after it was already done. The Poor Papa cartoon by Disney depicted Oswald in a more, short and stumpy and grouchy style, I guess. Head more oval-shaped and, whiskers around his face, looked like real rabbits. However, Universal execs weren't a fan of this cartoon, so it was put to the side until properly releasing in June of 1928. Walt Disney and Charles Mintz would go back to the drawing board and redesign Oswald in a younger, more rotund manner for his Trolley Troubles cartoon in September 1927. This cartoon followed Oswald in charge of running a trolley that was constantly put in danger due to messed up tracks. I really liked how the ending scene showed Oswald kissing his foot as a nod to the Lucky Rabbit's foot folklore, with his epithet as the Lucky Rabbit and all. Universal liked this cartoon a lot more, and this would be the start of Oswald getting pushed into the spotlight for animation. From September 1927 to September 1928, 27 total cartoons would be made starring Oswald. Some reoccurring characters would appear alongside Oswald within this year of content, most notably Pete, who of course became one of the most iconic Disney villains from the Mickey Mouse verse, as well as Hortensia, formerly known as Sadie. Hortensia basically served as the Minnie Mouse to Oswald's Mickey. The love interest too was either in some kind of danger or had to be won over by Oswald's charms. Although technically speaking, Oswald's first love interest was another cartoon rabbit named Fanny Cottontail, who also debuted in the Poor Papa cartoon, but after the release of the Banker's Daughter cartoon in November 1927, Fanny was sidelined more in favor of Hortensia as the main love interest. Where from then on, Fanny's appearances were borderline non-existent, notably coming back as Oswald's younger sister now in the 1934 Candy House short by Walter Lantz, as well as a crew member in the Disney Speedstorm racing game, which released in September 2023, her design here resembling the modern Oswald look, but with, full eyelashes and curled sideburns. So about a 79-year gap, kind of insane. The success of Oswald would be great for lining up the pockets of both Walt and Roy Disney. These guys went on to buy 10 acres worth of land in Palm Springs/Desert, California. This first year of Oswald cartoons wouldn't come without some challenges though, specifically contract negotiations between Walt Disney and Charles Mintz over Oswald's usage, as George Winkler was going behind Walt's back hiring away his animators, where in spring of 1928, a negotiation meeting took place where Mintz proposed Disney get a 20% cut of Oswald's profits. This was supposedly because of the issues with the economy at the time, as this meeting took place about a year and a half before the Wall Street crash of 1929, which served as the catalyst to the Great Depression. But even though a lot of the Disney animators at the time went with Mintz, Walt gave up on Oswald's future until further notice, allowing Mickey Mouse to take the spotlight with the Steamboat Willie cartoon, which became such a massive success that saying goodbye to Oswald didn't feel as bittersweet as before. If anything, it was a blessing in the long run. Obviously, there's no way of knowing, but it's very possible Disney wouldn't have been as successful as they were back then if it wasn't for Mickey's takeover. Or maybe keeping Oswald would have made them, bigger than that, but again, no way of knowing. Despite Disney employees no longer having involvement with Oswald for a while, that didn't stop him from appearing in other cartoons and comics. Shortly after Mintz/Universal acquired fired Oswald, Mintz would have his contract axed by Carl Laemmle, who was still the head of Universal at the time, allowing cartoonist and animator Walter Lantz to oversee Oswald for the next 10 years or so, where he'd go on to produce 142 Oswald cartoons in that 1929 to 1939 timeframe. Although Oswald's design was changed pretty drastically during this time period under new management, at one point he started wearing the classic white gloves clown shoes combo, a golf shirt, and had the Pac-Man looking eyes instead of black dots like before. Personally, not a huge fan of this Oswald design, and I'm glad recent adaptations of him haven't used this. A one-and-done redesign for the Case of the Lost Sheep cartoon had Oswald looking extremely different, much closer resembling a real-life bunny rabbit and only wearing black overalls. Both of these redesigns were done by Lantz animator Manuel Moreno, who was instructed by Lantz directly to make Oswald look cuter than he used to because Disney was also going through character design changes at the time. Pretty sure cartoons started to become more synonymous with kids rather than adults by this point, so making the main characters cuter and lighthearted felt like the better play. The more realistic bunny design would be the main one used for the remainder of Oswald's lifespan when it came to theatrical cartoons starring him until March 1943. The year 1930 would mark the first ever color appearance of Oswald through the King of Jazz cartoon, which was also the first Technicolor animated piece that included both color and sound. Oswald's original design was still being used at the time too. From then until 1943, a total of 3 cartoons and 2 strip Technicolor starring Oswald would be made, those being Toyland Premiere, Springtime Serenade, and Egg Cracker Suite, where the first 2 would use the Pac-Man-eyed white gloves designed Oswald, with Egg Cracker using a variant of the realistic bunny look that had gray fur and red overalls. During the Lantz era, Oswald would have different voice actors as well, which was pretty big at the time as his original Disney cartoons were all silent ones. Animator Bill Nolan, who was responsible for designing Felix the Cat, provided Oswald's voice in the Cold Turkey cartoon, aka the first Lantz cartoon with any kind of dialogue. Soon after, former circus performer Pinto Colvig voiced Oswald in every cartoon featuring him until 1931, followed by Hollywood legend Mickey Rooney voicing him in pieces like Hairmail. The previously mentioned Egg Cracker Suite cartoon would have June Fourway voice the gray-furred Oswald. She became very well known for her portrayal of Rocky the Squirrel from the Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons until she passed away in 2014. With Oswald's theater run ending in 1943, the only other time he'd appear in major cartoons was through cameos like in the Woody Woodpecker Polka released in October 1951. But throughout his time in the 1930s to 1950s or so, Oswald starred and made cameos in various comic strips. The first being the Oswald the Rabbit strips, which ran from 1935 to 1936. Artist animator Allstahl drew Oswald using the white gloves Pac-Man eye design, with the longest running set of Oswald comics coming in the form of his feature in New Funnies, which went on for a whole 20 years from 1942 to 1962 specifically. His New Funnies Dell Comics version looked a lot like his Egg Cracker Suite cartoon design when it came to body type and facial features, with the big changes is his fur was now more brown than gray, and the clothes he wore was a red jacket with blue pants. Characters like Toby the Bear, who appeared as a side character all the way back in the 1928 Old Swimming Hole cartoon, would return as more of a main character for this comic strip, with he and Oswald acting like roommates of sorts in the fictional Lantzville, which was obviously named after Walter Lantz likeness. 2 new characters named Floyd and Lloyd would become mainstays starting in 1948 issues. They were 2 young bunnies that Toby adopted for Oswald to take care of. By 1953, stories surrounding Oswald and the 2 kids became more of a focus, which resulted in Toby disappearing forever, with the majority of his comic appearances post-1962 coming in cameos in the Woody Woodpecker comic series, which eventually ended sometime in 1975 if I'm not mistaken. The sources on specific end dates for that series are a bit unclear from what I can tell. Oswald's representation for about the next 20 to 30 years would be about non-existent though. No cartoons, no comics, nothing. Part of the reason he lost some favor in the public eye was something I was not expecting at all before researching this video. According to a News From Me article by Mark Evanair, who was a writer for the Garfield and Friends cartoon, even though Oswald's time in the spotlight had already, kind of passed by the early 60s, the media constantly covering JFK's assassin Lee Harvey Oswald made things even worse. With that man's name holding nothing but negative weight to it, the very idea to make another cartoon or comic strip starring Oswald at the time felt taboo. Never thought that would be a sentence I'd read out loud about a cartoon rabbit, but here we are. It wasn't until February 2006 where Oswald would be granted a second chance at life. At this time, a deal was struck between Disney and the now NBC Universal that granted Disney several assets, in exchange for famous play-by-play sportscaster Al Michaels transferring to NBC's Sports Network. The rights to use Oswald for future projects, as well as the 27 cartoons from the late 1920s starring him, were now Disney property, while Universal still owned the other films made during the 30s and 40s. Al Michaels had a pretty funny comment about this deal too, saying, quote,
Oswald is definitely worth more than a
4th round draft choice. I'm gonna be a trivia answer someday. CEO at the time, and technically current CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, was the one responsible for Oswald's return to Disney, as the development team for Buena Vista Games pitched the idea for the game Epic Mickey to Bob Iger back in 2003, but because he was just the COO at the time, he didn't have the power to get Oswald back. So once he obtained that position, he made it his mission to get Oswald back under Disney no matter the cost. And mission successful, because the release of Epic Mickey for the Wii in 2011 would serve as Oswald's big break for a genuine public interest again after several decades of obscurity. For the first time ever, both Oswald and Mickey would be starring together in any piece of media. I know Bob Iger is a bit of a bastard for trying to integrate so much AI into the Disney brand as of late, and maybe I'll get shot on for this take, but I gotta give him a little bit of credit for being the core reason Oswald returned in such a grandiose way. Epic Mickey would be fondly remembered by the majority of the people who played it back in the day, despite some flaws at the time like the extreme reliance on the Wii's motion controls for the game's core gimmick or the rickety camera controls. Everything else seemed to be viewed in a positive light, especially the story, characters, and general vibe the environments went for throughout the game. It follows Mickey trekking through a wasteland world created by Yen Sid from Fantasia, a world where forgotten characters can live in peace. Yet the game still threw in some familiar faces for the modern audience to recognize, like Captain Hook, Donald, Daisy, and Goofy. I imagine having only characters from the Oswald era besides Mickey would have been tough to market. But when Mickey's curiosity gets the better of him, he spills a bunch of paint and thinner over the world, resulting in a thinner disaster that would plague the world for decades until Mickey would be forcibly dragged in by a monster named the Blot, which came to life due to Mickey's mess. Oswald would feel the brunt of the thinner disaster more than anyone, as due to his status as the first forgotten cartoon character of the Disney universe, he was the de facto king of the wasteland. So even though he didn't find out Mickey was responsible for the disaster until towards the end of the game, he's still self-aware about his forgotten existence and bitter about Mickey's success, because it came at the cost of Disney giving up on him. Hence why the game's first act involved Oswald running away from Mickey and setting up roadblocks out of spite. While the game's second act revolved around Oswald and Mickey working together to rebuild a rocket so they could reach the Blot, Oswald was willing to swallow his bitterness for the most part if it meant saving the wasteland. But that didn't stop him from throwing in some jabs at Mickey every now and then. Oswald is obviously furious with Mickey when he finds out he caused the thinner disaster, but his anger towards Mickey just made things worse and released even more thinner than before. At this point, both of these guys had made unintentional, bad mistakes that dealt harm to this world. But this doesn't make either of them, bad guys overall, and Oswald was able to realize this. As by the time the Blot was defeated, he was given the chance to leave the wasteland if he wanted by taking the heart the Blot stole from Mickey for himself. But in the end, he gave the heart back to Mickey, and now both of them were heroes and friends. One could say brothers. Brothers by ink.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Oswald would reunite with his girlfriend Hortensia too, who was one of the many characters sucked up by the Blot. Happy ever after ending type shit. Unless you choose thinner only, in which case you have no soul. The game ended up selling quite well, with the latest data stating it sold 2 million copies combined between NA and Europe by late 2011, with the remake Epic Mickey Rebrush dropping in late 2024, where many saw it as an improvement to the original thanks to the improved graphics and other quality of life changes. Although I couldn't find a source with specific numbers, Rebrushed was said to be the 6th best-selling Switch game title in September 2024, only factoring in physical sales. Not bad considering Zelda Echoes of Wisdom came out around the same time. The success of the original Epic Mickey would get a sequel available on other platforms besides the Wii in 2012, Epic Mickey 2, The Power of Two. Did they really need two in there twice? Sadly, to say this game wasn't as well received as the first would be an understatement. To put it bluntly, it's ass. Like, really bad. Full transparency, I have never played this game myself, so I cannot speak on its quality too much from a personal experience like with the first game or Rebrushed, but it doesn't take a genius to take one look at the Metacritic scores from both critics and audience to see the negative scores matching the positive ones is a bad thing. The bad camera still being a thing sounds like it would be annoying, so I get that. The fact that it was such a massive issue in the first and still wasn't fixed in the sequel is bound to sting. And thankfully, Rebrush seemed to fix it completely. As far as I could tell, the camera never really gave me issues on my recent playthrough. Oswald was now accompanying Mickey throughout his entire journey, with his abilities serving as the game's main gimmick. Reminded me a lot of how the Mario and Luigi series of games played. However, people said his AI was really bad if you're playing single player, so that's obviously a problem. A video from YouTuber AntDude that went into the nitty-gritty of all things Epic Mickey showed gameplay of the Wii U version, and it was given Pokemon Scarlet and Violet a run for its money when it came to the gold medal and terrible frame rate. To take another dig at Pokemon real quick, Epic Mickey 2 did actually have fully voice-acted cutscenes, which I thought was cool, and I could see why some might find it a bit off-putting or hard to get used to, though, as the first game wasn't fully voice-acted. Rather, the characters made different grumbling sounds over the text. Oswald's voice in Epic Mickey 2 would be provided by voice-acting legend Frank Welker, who's provided the voice of Fred and Scooby-Doo across the whole franchise since the beginning. From what I watched of the cutscenes, I think he did a pretty solid job. The singing, on the other hand,
if we don't band together, Wasteland will be destroyed.
I could take it or leave it. Funny enough, a 3DS game, Epic Mickey Power of Illusion, would also release on the Nintendo 3DS the same day as Power of 2, sort of serving as a sequel to the Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse game on the Sega Genesis, while still being considered part of the Epic Mickey series due to Mickey's design remaining the same and the paintbrush still playing a major role in the gameplay. Although that seemed to do more harm than good, as the painting this time around was a total pace breaker, taking up the entire screen and having you fill in the blank areas with paint on the touchscreen. It sort of reminded me of how Kirsty and Huey's abilities worked in Paper Mario Sticker Star and Color Splash respectively. Problem is, a pace breaker like that is way harder to get behind in a 2D platformer compared to the action-adventure style of those Paper Mario games. Plus, Oswald's involvement here is way less than the other two. He's in the opening cutscene showing Mickey how the Castle of Illusion appeared in Wasteland, then pretty much fucks off after that. A bit of a nitpick, but I also thought it was weird how, even though the main antagonist is Miserabelle again from the original Castle of Illusion, she was using Maleficent's appearance the whole time. Why not just make Maleficent the main antagonist of the game at that point? Very peculiar, in my opinion. So after the questionable success of the double power Epic Mickey games, Disney would announce that Junction Point Studios, aka Epic Mickey's developers, would close its studio. Hence, Purple Lamp, a THQ Nordic subsidiary, would take the helm developing Rebrushed. So even though the Epic Mickey series ended on a bit of a rough note when it came to new installments, the overall mission was a success. Oswald was making his way back into the spotlight, like appearing in even more video games outside the Epic Mickey series, like Disney Emoji Blitz, Disney Dreamlight Valley, or Disney Speedstorm. Comics starring him would be made as well, most notably the Epic Mickey Tales of Wasteland comic, which served as a prequel to the events of the first game, focusing on various adventures he went on throughout Wasteland, usually accompanied by Hortensia or one of the 3 animatronic characters. I really like what they did with the Mad Doctor in this comic, making him more emotionally manipulative towards Oswald as opposed to his cartoonishly evil self from the first games who kind of just wants to, create destruction. Good stuff. A Tumblr user named Dahlia1784 uploaded all the panels on their page if you ever felt like reading it all. As of 2014, Oswald was making major appearances in Disney parks around the world, like meet and greets at California's Disney Adventure Park and Tokyo Disney Sea. Shanghai and Hong Kong's Disneylands in particular dedicated their 2023 New Year celebrations to Oswald because 2023 was the year of the rabbit. But of course, we gotta save the best for last. Oswald returning to original animated form. Oswald would make a major cameo in the 2013 animated short film Get a Horse, which was not only the first Disney film to be solo directed by a woman, aka Lauren McMullen, but it was nominated for Best Animated Short Film at that year's Academy Awards, where 9 years later, on December 1st, 2022, Oswald would star in his first animated Disney production since 1928. Almost a full century later. Future Mark here forgot to mention there was technically a holiday greeting e-card starring Oswald made by Disney Japan back in 2013, which would technically qualify as Oswald's major return to starring in animation. But the 2022 one did get a lot more traction, so. The short titled Oswald the Lucky Rabbit is only about a minute long, but follows Oswald going to see a movie with Hortensia as the star, where he proceeds to use Toon Force to break into the movie itself so he can give her a kiss. Cute stuff as always. He'd make more small cameos in other Disney projects too, like in the Mickey Mouse cartoon episode Canned, where he was literally dug out of a trash heap before being flung into a bin. A storyboard artist for the show, Tara Billinger, said Oswald was also going to appear in the episode Hats Enough, where Mickey would use a magic wand to turn himself into Oswald, but the scene was supposedly cut because of time constraints. Where as of writing this video, and briefly mentioned earlier, the next big project featuring Oswald will be the Disney Plus live-action / animated hybrid produced by Jon Favreau. The series will only be 3 episodes long according to insider Daniel Richman. Oswald himself has yet to be voice cast, but big Hollywood names like Kathryn Hahn and Steve Martin are set to play roles in this miniseries, with Steve Martin saying some of his scenes were filmed at Disneyland's Magic Store.
I did a one-day shoot at Disneyland for a show that's upcoming, and it took place in the Magic Shop where I worked when I was 15.
Which makes me think the main setting for the whole show will take place across the Disneyland parks. We'll see though. Not sure if I'll be, watching this on Disney Plus officially though with all the AI stuff. We'll see how I end up viewing it. A bit of a different video from my usual content for sure. Yeah, I've done these history/full story type videos before, but it's always been around characters or series within my typical comfort zone like Total Drama, Adventure Time, or Gravity Falls, but I wanted to step a bit outside the box and see how it might go. What better time to do it than now with how awful YouTube CPM is in January? I just love history too. It's always been one of the few subjects in school that didn't bore me to tears growing up, so I'd love to do more of these if the support is there. If you have any suggestions on who you'd like covered, let me know. Also, quick shout out to Oswald's strongest soldier, Jake Neutron. That brother really deserves some flowers for helping put Oswald's name out there more with his animations. Like, subscribe, all that good jazz, but for now, I will see you guys next time. Peace out, take care, bye-bye.